Hello, everybody. My name is Kari, and I'm a part of UVU's Interfaith Leadership Fellows and the host of UVU Worldview Project. We are so excited to share the stories of 4 different students with different worldviews, beliefs, and perspectives. After interviewing each of these individuals, we will get back together as a group to discuss what we learned and ways that we hope to build interfaith dialogue here at UVU. I hope you enjoy these discussions as much as I did hosting them.
Okay, I am here with Tanner, aka T. Halls. Share with the class a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, of course. Like she said, my name's Tanner Hallsey. I am from Phoenix, Arizona originally. Currently, I'm a junior at UVU studying marketing, and kind of on the side, I'm running my media agency, content creation agency, where I do different creative and event work for anybody who needs it. So yeah, I mean, I consider myself to be a pretty boring person, to be honest, but that's a little bit about me.
This is what I will say as well. Tanner, I knew Tanner before this. Tanner is one of my besties. One of my favorite things about Tanner is that he's just so honest. Like, he is just the definition of just being a real one. So when I wanted to film this podcast, I knew it was Tanner who I wanted to have on because I just knew we would have a fire discussion. So just jumping into it, just trying to understand a little bit about your background. Tell us your history with just organized religion.
Yeah. So I was born into a family that was active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Both of my parents grew up in Utah, were raised in the church. I mean, we've been members ever since the 1850s. Like, it's been in the family forever. And so, yeah, I was born into the LDS faith in an active home, and I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. And so growing up, it was just like such a integral part of our family relationship. Just like the traditions and everything that we do within our faith was just so important in my upbringing. So
how would you describe what your faith looks like now? Because I agree, I think growing up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, religion becomes a part of like the culture within your community and the culture within your family. But how would you describe your beliefs now in relation to kind of how you described it growing up?
For sure. So first off, I would say, like, growing up in an active family, like, you obviously don't have a testimony immediately. Like, you kind of feed off of the testimony of your parents, and in my case, my older siblings. And so I always knew it was right just because that's what my parents taught me was right. And so I'd always go to church. I would participate. We would read scriptures as a family, the Bible and the Book of Mormon. And then you kind of get to a certain point where, like, you start to have a lot of questions. And you start to try to build your own testimony from your own experiences rather than from the experiences of others. And I think that where I'm at today compared to where I was at growing up is, you know, I would say that the LDS Church is a very structured religion. A lot of people think there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of extra commandments people might say that we need to follow. But in reality, it's like, growing up, you might look at them as just things you have to follow, but I'd say where I'm at now is I don't look at it as a structure as much, like a structure that I have to follow. It's more so guidelines of how to live a better, more wholesome life that leads to more blessings as a human. And so, yeah, instead of looking at the church as a structure, I more so look at it as just a guideline that, you know, helps us become who God wants us to be.
Yeah. You mentioned the term testimony.
Right.
As I have started to get a little bit more into interfaith dialogue, I've realized that term is fairly specific to your religion as well as kind of Christianity. So for someone who wouldn't be familiar with that term, like, how would you describe what is a testimony?
I would say a testimony is a declaration of your faith. I would say a testimony includes the things that are really close to your heart, things that you hold true in your life, things that you know to be true from personal experience. And I think that's kind of the key. It has to come from lived personal experience.
I love that you described it as a declaration of your faith, because I think it is specific terminology to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but it's clear that a testimony is something anybody can form just to like, and I love what you said about testimonies being built off of personal experiences. I think one thing you hear a lot within the church is we use the term "we believe" a lot, just because, I mean, there are like very specific things that the church believes in, but a testimony allows you to make that shift of it not just being about we, but about I.
Right.
And that kind of leads into the next question I wanted to ask you, just about how you feel like your beliefs and your commitments have changed as you've gotten older. Because like you said, your testimony changes and your conviction grows as you have experiences. So naturally, as you get older, you have more of those experiences. So how have you felt like your commitments and your beliefs have changed as you've gotten older?
For sure. I always go back to the first and great commandment, which is to love God. I think, religion asks a lot of us. It's like definitely not something easy, but it should be something that's rewarding. And I think when religion and organized religion can kind of take a toll on you and not be giving you as much blessings as you would expect, or at least what you think is promised to you, I think that all comes from when you're not living the first and great commandment of loving God. Because I think you only receive the blessings of following the commandments and living a life of organized religion when you understand the why. And I think when you love God, that is the why. And that's like the blessing you get from doing it, is when you are doing it for God and not for any other reason. And I think in Utah, it can be kind of tough because there's so many people that are of the same religion. So I might not be doing it for myself. I might be going to church just because my roommates are, or because that's just what the culture tells you to do. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in that. But I think it's so important, especially for me, now, to realize why I'm doing things and realizing that I'm doing it for that first and great commitment because I love God. And that's when I really see the blessings in my life when living, the LDS faith.
I love that. You bring up a great point about acknowledging that sometimes participating in a faith like the LDS church can start to become more of a social activity. And I think that we all have times where we tend to maybe believe or do certain things because that's what our friends, or in this case, the general public, may be doing. So how do you feel like you bridge that gap between not allowing yourself to fall into doing church-related things as a social outing and allowing it to be an opportunity to build your personal faith?
I think that's a great question, and I can't sit here and tell you honestly that I've been great at that all the time. And I will say, living in Arizona, growing up in Arizona, I was in northern Phoenix when there wasn't a lot of members compared to how it is here in Utah, at least. And so living the gospel felt unique, and I needed it because I'd go to school and there's so many cultural and societal things that kind of go against what we teach within the LDS faith. And so, in a sense, it was almost, I don't want to say easier to live the gospel, but I almost felt more motivated because it was against the norm. And I'm one of those guys who doesn't like going with the norms. I always want to, yeah. And so in Arizona, it was I felt like it was more necessary. I needed that, and I just in that world that I lived in. And then I moved to Utah when I was in high school, and so much of the school is enrolled in seminary, and the majority of people are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And when I came here, I kind of felt that change where, okay, peer pressure is now telling me to go to church. Peer pressure is now telling me to live the gospel, and people can actually see if I'm living the commandments because we're all trying to live the same principles. And so in a sense that was difficult because that can take away the why, the reason why you're doing it. And so ever since, moving to Utah and trying to navigate how my faith has had to change compared to how it was in Arizona, I really just have to stay consistent. One of my favorite things within our faith is that, we're all trying to become disciples of Jesus Christ. And the word disciple comes from discipline. And you really can't see progress, and you can't build a testimony, you can't see results unless you're consistent and disciplined in something. And so the more often I'm doing the things that we're supposed to be doing within our religion, like praying, reading the scriptures, and doing those things, that's when you see momentum. You see the spiritual momentum that really helps you see the why. And I see those blessings. I'm okay, I understand why I'm doing it. And so it's just staying consistent in the small and simple things that lead you to, understand the reason for it all. So.
That's awesome. I think that brings up a great point about, at the end of the day, as human beings, we're really just trying to find a sense of purpose.
Right.
Like, we really are just trying to find our why. And it's so interesting to hear about how understanding your why can be distorted from not only being a minority or being the odd one out, but also from being a part of a majority,
right,
where you really do have to ask yourself, okay, why am I doing this? Why is this important to me? Because the social aspect of religion and culture is fleeting.
Right.
It only lasts a certain amount of time. And I will agree, I think it's really difficult to stay locked in spiritually when you're in a place where it is just the norm, right, and almost expected to go to church on Sunday and to go to Institute on Thursdays or whenever it may be. And so you almost do lose sight of what's important in a different way. So I like that you brought that up, because I think that is something that we all experience, and I think all of us struggle with a little bit. Do you feel like there have been moments within your own faith community where you felt misunderstood?
I think I absolutely have. And I think, the gospel and faith is so individualistic. Like, it's different for everybody. We're all on our own different paths and our own journeys. And my mind also goes to the idea of contraries. Like, the gospel is full of different contraries. Like, if you look at the teachings of Jesus Christ and stuff that's found in the scriptures, you have justice and mercy. God is the lamb, but he's also the lion. Like, there's things that seem like they should be opposites, but somehow the gospel just kind of resides in the middle. And I think that applies to where people are at within the church as well. Like, when you're in a different spot, you might need a little bit more of this rather than that. And if you're in another spot, you might need a little bit of that other side and the other side. And so I think where I'm trying to go with this is, like, in my life, I have struggled with the word of wisdom within the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which, for those who don't know, are pretty much just principles and guidelines saying that we shouldn't consume certain things, such as coffee, alcohol, tobacco, among other things, just for our spiritual well-being as well as our physical well-being, and also they can just be, tests of faith. And so as I was struggling with the word of wisdom, it's very easy for other people who live the same gospel as I do to look at me and say, oh, wow, like, we're not supposed to do that, and he's doing that. So I feel like I could definitely be misunderstood in that sense, but I don't think I was doing it out of open rebellion. I was doing it because I genuinely was struggling with a testimony of the word of wisdom, and I was trying to navigate that. It's easy for other people to, especially in Utah, to look at me and go, oh, well, that's not normal because we're not taught to do that. And with that being said, when I say that people misunderstood me, I don't want to say that they were judging me, because I don't want to say that, they were judging me, because, we're all on our own different paths, like I said originally, but it can definitely be misunderstanding because a lot of people just, wouldn't handle the same situation the same as I have. And so in that sense, I definitely have felt misunderstood, but I wouldn't say that with a negative connotation. I would definitely just say that I feel like we all get to different answers in different ways. And for me, that was just kind of my way of going and navigating through the faith crisis concerning the word of wisdom that I was going through.
Well, and I think it goes back to what you said about there are so many different reasons why we do the things that we do, and we follow the principles that we follow. And allowing it to be an opportunity to build faith is always one of those reasons.
Right.
And in order to build faith or build a conviction on something, you kind of have to do a little trial and error.
Right.
We make mistakes.
Yeah.
And for those of us who need to really understand the reason and the why, it requires us to approach things with more curiosity rather than just being able to, I hate to say blindly follow, but follow without any hesitations.
Right.
You
And I'm super jealous of the people who are able to build their testimonies and have that faith without going through the trial and error. Because it's in my situation, I grew up in the church and I was just told and taught not to do those things and to follow the word of wisdom. And so for me, it was I was always very jealous of the people who maybe weren't raised in the church, who maybe, experienced those things and then really found the blessing after not following it. or after following it, I mean.
And I think that, again, it goes back to how faith is so personal. And I agree. I feel like I'm kind of the same way. I almost needed to push the boundaries a little bit to come to understand why things were important.
Right.
And I think that there's value in both. I think it's a good example of how our faith is so personal.
Yeah.
And we come to learn and know the things that we know from our own experiences. And for some people, it built more faith to just to do it.
Right.
And maybe there's not that as much doubt or confusion. Yeah. And for some of us, like, we have to make the mistake. We have to do the thing that we're not supposed to understand why we shouldn't have done it in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of value in that too. But I agree. I think it's easy to misunderstand when we do choose to live gospel principles in different ways, right, in a faith where there almost seems like there is a straight and narrow way of living the gospel and doing things. It can be confusing and hard to understand when we choose to approach things in a different way.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I wanted to explore in this project is just being able to understand people who believe just differently than we do. So I wanted to ask you if you have a time in your life where you realized you had an incorrect assumption or maybe even prejudice about somebody who believed in a different religion or worldview than you, and where do you think that came from? What do you think you learned from that experience?
Yes, I love this question, and for those who have, grown up within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will understand this, but we have this thing called testimony meetings, and we share our testimonies frequently, I guess, and we always hear, I know the church is true. I know that, we're in the correct faith, and we hear all these things like every Sunday. We hear all the times from people bearing their testimony. And so growing up, it's like you don't feel better than anyone else, but you get all these reassurances and affirmations that we have it all. You know what I'm saying? And then you just kind of wake up one day and you realize that that's not the case. For me, it happened when I was serving a 2-year LDS mission. I was down in southern Mexico. And I just remember growing up in the church, that's just always what you hear. And I was going to Mexico and I was like, I have this truth and I know that it's true and I just want to go and teach everybody that. And I believe that and I believe in the faith that I'm living, obviously. And so when I was down in Mexico, you just start to realize that God's hand is in everybody's life. And so many people are seeing so many miracles and seeing the hand of God and feeling His love in so many different religions and so many different walks of life. And so for me, it was just having grown up in such a concentrated area of so many members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it was so refreshing and eye-opening to see the works of God in all different walks of life and in all different beliefs. Because at the end of the day, He really just wants the best for us and wants us to love each other and to care for each other and be like His Son, Jesus Christ. And we can all be like that through so many different means. And at the end of the day, it's just those principles that are being taught that are so important for us to live. And so, after those experiences that I was having in Mexico, I started to realize that I could feel my perspective shifting, that I was so more open to other beliefs and what they were teaching, what they were hearing, what they were feeling, and what they were experiencing, because all of that is valid. We're not more valid than anybody else just because it's the faith that we believe. I think our faith can learn so much from other religions. And I think other religions could also learn from us, but I think we can all learn from each other. Because we're all just so imperfect and we're all just trying to find our way, no matter what faith we're in and no matter how much we believe it. And so I think my perspective was shifted for the better, just because I was able to sympathize and empathize with people a lot better who aren't from the same walks of life as I am. And so it was very much needed and one of the best takeaways that I could have gotten from that experience when I was serving a mission.
Tanner, you're speaking my language and you're using a couple of my favorite words ever in the whole world. And one of them is perspective and the other one is empathy. And I think that we add so much value to our lives and our relationships when we have perspective. And I think it goes back to what interfaith dialogue is all about. And it's about building perspective and allowing us to perceive others and perceive the world and our lives from a different viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's only possible when we completely leave our normal environment and allow ourselves to be open to new experiences and hearing from people that we would not have maybe been comfortable talking with if we weren't put in those situations. And I think it also builds a sense of empathy, which is monumental when building interfaith dialogue, because we have to be coming from a place of genuine openness and care and curiosity for why people believe the things that they do and what value and perspective that can add within our own lives and how we can use those teachings to better our relationships with one another and the people around us. So I love that that experience gave you that perspective. It kind of forces you to be open in ways that you maybe wouldn't have.
Absolutely.
Okay, so kind of following along that same line of assumptions or maybe misconceptions, do you feel like there is a stereotype or misunderstanding within your own belief that you wish you could change if you could?
I think there absolutely are tons concerning the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I think, I don't know if it's just my algorithm, but on social media, I just see so much stuff about people criticizing and just like saying a lot of bad things about our religion. But every single time it's based off of false information, like nearly like 99% of the time. And so I think one of those phrases that gets thrown around is that like we're a cult or we're not Christians or something like that. And I would just love to have people go to the right sources. Like if you're going to throw things out onto the internet and say things like, at least do your research. Like if people want to research things about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a lot of them are going to like sources that aren't from the church. Like go to the source of the church, the people that are actually telling you what they believe in. And the idea that we're a cult, I've just never quite understood. Like you could strip everything away from our church and just look at the basic principles that we are living and apply them into anybody's life, and like anybody would say those are great principles to live by. But people are blinded by other historical lies or historical truths that just kind of affect how they view the church. And so I just would like invite people to go to the source. Like if you want to learn more about our religion, what we believe, read the Book of Mormon. Read the Bible, which we too believe, which other people don't believe that we read. And then I'd also just say to just look at the lives that we're trying to live and then honestly tell us that we're like living a bad life. Like, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So
you mentioned how the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is often referred to as a cult. Mm-hmm. So how do you think some of those misconceptions affect the way that you feel and perceive the church, or the way that you feel and perceive others?
Yeah. Well, I definitely, have extreme level of confidence in the life that I'm living within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I know the person that I'm trying to become and how this religion is helping me become that person. And so when you hear those things online that we're a cult, like it obviously like hurts, like it stinks because you want people to understand the things that you understand and actually go to the right sources. So it obviously doesn't feel great, but I have enough confidence in the life that I'm trying to live that it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing. Like it doesn't affect me too much. It's just a shame that other people don't understand and respect the type of lives and values that we're also trying to live. Do you feel like it changes the way that you approach relationships with others that may not believe in the same thing? Like, do you feel like are you a little bit more closed off about your religious beliefs because you know that there are some serious misconceptions about? I honestly don't think that I am. Like, I don't think that it affects the way that I, take on different relationships with different people. I've talked a little bit about growing up in Arizona, but like all of my friends weren't LDS, like not one of them. And so I wasn't afraid of people knowing that I was, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I loved people to know that. And if there are people who did have misconceptions and had questions, it was like I knew I had the answers. And I knew that if I truly explained the origin of my beliefs and what we believe at its core, I knew that they wouldn't question it anymore. So I know that those feelings of judgment or misconceptions that people might have, I know that it came from lack of information, I guess is what I should say. And the second that people are informed about what we're about, I knew that wouldn't be an issue, if that makes sense. And so if they don't want to know that, that's on them, but that's not necessarily on me. So.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think it also ties into how one of the best ways that you can gain a better understanding about other beliefs is, like you said, going to the right sources, but also speaking with people who do believe those things.
Right.
And being able to have interfaith relationships and friendships that allow you to ask those questions and have that open dialogue, I think is a lot of how we move past some of those stigmas and how we allow our perceptions of people to not just be about what they believe, but about who they are and maybe like why those things are important to them. I think it can be very difficult. I know that there are a lot of worldviews that struggle with this imbalance of what you see on the media, what's popular within our current culture, historical and past events. I think that those small experiences or times where we are prevalent on the media really change the way that people perceive a whole group of people. And that can be very, very difficult to kind of to break some of those stigmas. So it is very important to go directly to the source. And sometimes that is the church's website, and sometimes it's just going to somebody who does believe those things. I think we tend to do a little bit better when we can have those face-to-face interactions. I also love what you said about when there is a sense of confidence in what you believe and what you know, you can move forward with answering those questions with a lot more openness rather than getting a little defensive that people are maybe confused or maybe don't understand. And sometimes they just simply disagree.
Right.
But when you're confident in what you believe and what you know is important to you, there's always space for those conversations. And I think that's the only way we can really promote having some of those harder conversations is just being a person who is always willing and open to having them. I feel like it's kind of a two-way street.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that because earlier we were kind of talking about misconceptions that I might have towards other people and other ideologies. And I think it's a two-way road for sure. Like I'm so passionate talking about, you know, my faith and how I want people to understand it, but I know that there's people who want me to feel the same way about what they're believing. And I'm sure that I have misconceptions about other people and their beliefs too. So I think it's very important that we have just as much of a desire to understand people as to be understood.
I agree. So yes, going to the right sources. ChatGPT, not the right source.
Not the move.
Instagram, not the right source. You have to go to people who really live by those teachings, that find value in them, and just have those conversations. At the end of the day, that's all we can really do.
Exactly.
I love that you touched on how important it is for us to just be honest about some of the biases and assumptions that we all carry. I think that as human beings, we just tend to make assumptions because we want to make conclusions on things that we don't entirely understand, but we want some sort of understanding. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we understand people who see the world differently than we do. So just at first glance, when you hear someone describe themselves as a deep ecologist, what comes to mind to you?
When I think of deep ecologists, first off, I really admire those people because I feel like that's something that I'd like to know a little bit more about and care about more concerning the earth and nature and all of that. But I think it's so important, like, in my life, I've had a lot of experiences with nature where I can like feel God and I can feel His love and I can feel His presence. And so I feel like deep ecology is something that can definitely live and it has space to live and grow within a lot of different religions and a lot of different beliefs. And I think it should, just with the belief that God is our creator and that He gave us this earth to live out our lives and have these blessings and experience life, like I think is so beautiful. And so the idea of, caring for the world and feeling kind of a spiritual presence and power through it, I think is like extremely valid.
Love.
Okay.
I'm so impressed because when I'm fairly new to just interfaith leadership. And when I first heard deep ecology, genuinely had no idea what that was, at all.
Yeah.
So I'm impressed that you do have...
It's very baseline. I'm not even sure if I'm even
if it's
on the right
correct.
track there.
No, I love. Okay, kind of following along the same lines, like, what do you think about initial thoughts when you hear, like, Catholic?
Catholic. When I first hear Catholic, I think of tradition, and I think of ritual. I feel like the Catholics have so much faith, and they express that faith through ritual and through ordinances and through sacraments, which I think is so Old Testament tied. And I think that's so beautiful. I think they live that so well. And I think definitely in my faith, there's a lot of similarities there. There's not a lot of religions that still live to those traditions with rituals and sacraments and ordinances and stuff. And so I've always loved that aspect of their faith, and the way that they, value traditional lifestyles and things of that such. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I think about. So.
That's good. Again, I love that you still have a base understanding and are so quick to make connections and pull similarities. I think we tend to see other different worldviews, and the first thing we want to do is think about all the ways that we're different or all the ways that we disagree.
Yeah.
So I love the energy of starting first with what you have in common and the things that you just at first glance see value in. Last one is, what do you think about when you hear Muslim?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly wish I knew more about their faith. I haven't read much into the Quran and the different things that they believe. I think there definitely are a lot of stereotypes, because they're such a national religion. Like there are so many of them, and there's so many countries where that is their religion. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of friends, and I don't know a lot of people who are Muslim. So I wish I was a little bit more educated on what their beliefs are. But I do know that their religion is all about peace and love, and it advocates against war and violence and things like that. And so I think, definitely in my past and even now, like, we see like different acts of terrorism and things, and we might think like, we might pair Muslim with those acts of violence just because those people are Muslim. But then when you start to look into a little bit more, you understand that has nothing to do with their religion, and there's their extreme political stuff going on there. And even the Muslims that we would know here are very against that, obviously.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's very important that we don't correlate acts from a very small minority within a religion and generalize it onto an entire religion. So yeah, I think I definitely love to learn more about what they're about and what they teach about.
I think that some of those assumptions also kind of go back to what you spoke about earlier about how pop culture and social media play a huge role in the assumptions and biases that people form about us, and also the ones that we form about each other. So how would you say that social media has maybe changed or distorted your assumptions of some of these groups?
Yeah, well, I think social media does a great job at generalizing. And I also think social media, in terms of algorithms, if we're looking at a spectrum, social media takes the two extremes, those two sides of 10%, and that's what we're shown. And so I think it does a very poor job educating us, like, properly, and giving us the whole story. We only get the tips of the iceberg. And so I think it's very important to do your due diligence and like researching outside of just social media. And if you do see something that's like alarming or like, might cause you to believe something, it's important to always kind of take a step back and understand what you're viewing, where's the sources, how can I, look at this in a proper way. And so, yeah, I think social media is a very tough thing, and one of the most important things that we need to be able to navigate when it comes to interfaith.
I agree. I think social media does so much good
Yeah.
in terms of allowing us to connect with people that we may not have had the opportunity to without social media. But I also think social media can be so damaging.
Agreed.
I think when we don't have that face-to-face real interactions with one another, we become so desensitized
Yeah.
to the things that we see and the assumptions that we have based off of whatever we see on our For You page.
For sure.
So I think it is so important to be able to recognize, like at the very least recognize that a lot of the things that we are seeing aren't true.
Yep.
And we're lacking context. We lack perspective. And because of those things, we do tend to be desensitized
Right.
to the things that we see.
Absolutely.
So I love that. I think it's really important that we can acknowledge that and
Yeah.
make that differentiation. So generally when we talk about interfaith, we are referring to the diversity between our worldview and the worldviews of others around us. But I wanted to ask you specifically what your interfaith experience has been like within your own faith.
Right. No, that's a good question. I think I've talked about this a little bit, but, I think faith is very individualistic. And I think we have organization and structure to help us on our individual paths. And I think our relationships with God and whatever it is we believe in is going to differ no matter who we are. And so I think, like in my case, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have principles and we have core doctrine. And that core doctrine is, cemented and it's firm. We all kind of believe in these principles, these core doctrines. But then there's a lot of gray area and there's a lot of space for us to, gain opinions and feel it out for ourselves. And we're not necessarily told to believe it, but we kind of gain our own worldviews within our religion, and it's acceptable. Just because I think it's right doesn't mean you need to think that it's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of examples of that even within my family and my friend group, of just how we choose to believe how God functions in different aspects of our lives that aren't, considered to be core doctrine. And just for an example, growing up, I always, wanted to believe that God was a very hands-on God. That he was, orchestrating everything that was going on in my life. He is in the details, in every detail of life. And as I've grown up, I've definitely started to trend more of the side that I think God is very hands-off. I personally believe that, when the creation happened and He set things in motion, things can just happen, and life just happens. That's part of the trial that we're living. And I still do think that He's a very hands-on God and is in the details, but maybe not as much that I used to think, if that makes sense. And so I definitely still hear testimonies of other people in church and within the religion who might think that He is a more hands-on God than I do. And that's totally fine. I'm not going to sit there and tell them that I'm wrong, but it's it works differently for all of us. And those views help us specifically for where we're at and where I'm at in life. It just kind of helps my testimony, and to think that He's more sometimes of a hands-off God as well as a hands-on God. And so that's just kind of an example that I can think of how, our faith can differ within the same, umbrella of beliefs and core doctrines. And I think it's important that we have kind of different beliefs. I think it's very necessary because, with just how different our lives are and how different our trials are and things that we go through, I think just these different insights really create this culmination of, beautiful testimonies.
I agree. I think it goes back to how important it is that our worldviews are based off of our personal experiences.
Right.
And I think it's one thing that sometimes can be tricky within organized religion, where there is kind of a set structure or idea of, okay, this is what we believe. And I think there are so many things that we experience on a day-to-day, and there's so many outlying factors that play into why we believe the things that we do and why we think the way that we do, that sometimes we can come to assumptions based off of the same truth.
Right, exactly.
And that's a hard thing to kind of grapple with and understand while creating interfaith relationships within your own faith. Is sometimes you have those discussions and there is maybe a little bit of a debate regarding worldly topics or personal, anything going on in your personal life, and it kind of goes back to, well, that's not what I believe. It's girl, we believe the same thing. And so it can be hard to, I think that's why it's so important to just build interfaith dialogue
Yeah.
in all settings and in all relationships, because what's most important is understanding what you individually believe. And I think we do gain a better sense of respect and understanding when we view those relationships and those conversations on a one-to-one basis.
For sure.
Rather than, I'm not trying to represent my entire worldview, my entire faith.
Yes.
I can't speak for the people, but I can speak on my experiences
Yep.
and the things that are important to me.
Exactly.
Okay, just to kind of close things off, if anybody listening isn't familiar with your beliefs, what would you want them to take away from your story?
I will always testify and use every opportunity that I have to testify my testimony of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is my best friend, and I have a very strong testimony of his atonement and what he's done for me and the sacrifice that he has made for me and for everybody that I know. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we can get into all of the details of all of these different things, and I think a lot of the times that can just take us away from why we're doing it in the first place. Everything is to lead us back to Jesus Christ and to become more like him and to become disciples. And I think, the most important thing is to just strive to love him and to love others. It goes back to the first and second great commandment that we love God so that we can love everyone. And I think love is just the answer. And I think our world needs a lot more of that. And so I'm so grateful for, my faith, which teaches me that that is the most important thing. And Jesus Christ is the perfect example of love. And that's why I love him so much and strive to be like him. And that's why I'm also so grateful for other religions too, because I know that that's at the base of their teachings and the foundation of their beliefs. And so I think just at the end of the day, we can get into all of the mumbo jumbo of different religions and what they believe, but at the end of the day, it's just we are all striving to love each other no matter what. And so, can I share a quote?
Yes, girl.
Is that cool?
Yeah, King.
One of my favorite songs is a song called Under Pressure by David Bowie and Queen, if you've heard of it.
I think I'm familiar.
And it's like a super upbeat song. And then I just remember I was listening to it like a couple of years ago, and the last lines like sum up what we should be doing in life. It says, "'Cause love's such an old-fashioned word, and love dares you to care for the people on the edge of the night, and love dares you to change our way of caring about ourselves." I don't know why that hit me so hard, but it's like love is becoming such an old-fashioned word and uncool and just like not the thing to do. But like at the end of the day, it's like love is caring for everybody no matter where they're at. How it says in the song, like a lot of people are on the edge of the night, and a lot of us in a sense are in the edge of the night in our own ways, in our own trials. And I just think it's so important to love others just as much as we love ourselves. And I think that's the one thing that we're missing in this world more than anything. So I guess just my testimony and what I want other people to know that I believe is just that. I think that's what the world is missing. I think that's what our highest priority should be in every aspect and facet of life.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think it goes back to diversity allows us to understand that Jesus Christ loves us all.
Right.
And it almost means more to know that we are so different and we view things so differently, yet there is still a space in his heart for all of us. And I think we tend to be a little afraid of diversity.
Yeah.
Where I think when viewed with proper perspective, it actually allows us to increase our conviction in what we know and what we believe. So I love that. Also was not expecting you to pull out a David Bowie song. I was like, he's going to pull out a hymn. But no, that was perfect.
I'm so sorry.
No, I loved it. Okay, thank you so much, Tanner.
Thank you
I'm
so
so
much.
happy that you were here. I've loved talking to you.
It's been great. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any questions or are interested in learning anything more about what we discussed in our podcast today, there are links in the description below.